Now that we know how to create and interact with shapes, I think it's time that we start building our outline for our application. So you'll find in the demo content provided there is a JPEG called drawingoftheapp.jpg. It's not beautiful, but it'll do the job. It gives us our dimensions and it gives us our spacing for the primary elements of our app. So the first trick right off the bat, we're going to drag this JPEG onto the sketch icon, and it's going to automatically launch a brand new sketch document, and it's going to drop that JPEG in the document. It's even zoomed and scaled us to the appropriate size. Now next we need an artboard to begin creating. So we're going to go to Insert, followed by Artboard, and then we're going to choose the Portrait 6 under iPhone screens to get the iPhone 6 screen size. Now that it's given us our Portrait 6 screen size, I'm going to hit Command- to zoom out. And when we zoom out, we can see that our JPEG has become part of our artboard, which is not ultimately what we want. Let's start by naming our artboard, though, because it's currently highlighted on the layers list. I'm going to name this Outline and hit Return. Now I'm going to drag our JPEG to the left of the artboard, and I'm going to make it larger. So that way we can see it. It would be nice to be able to read the thing. Here we go. Then I'm going to hit Command-1 to zoom us in appropriately. That zooms us in just enough that the content fills the screen, but not too much that anything gets cut off. I'm going to be using Command-1 a lot, and I'm also going to be using Command-2 a lot. Command-2 will zoom into the selected object. Command-1 will zoom in or out, whichever is appropriate, to show everything that you have on your canvas. All of your artboards, all of your loose elements. When I say loose element, I'm referring to something that is not part of an artboard, like our JPEG here. So now that we've got our JPEG next to us, we can start working. So I'm going to tap R to select my rectangle tool, and I'm going to start by dragging from the top left corner of my artboard down and across, so that way I get my 750 by 40 rectangle here. And you don't have to nail it when you're clicking and dragging. If you get it a little bit off, you can visit the inspector, and you just want to make sure your X and Y for this object are 0 and 0, and then 750 by 40. Something goes wrong, just click and type in a different number. You can also use these up and down arrows to nudge. And if you remember our shortcut from earlier, you can use Command on the keyboard along with the arrow keys to nudge the size up and down. Left and right for the width, up and down for the height. Now, since I have several more rectangles to do, I'm not going to use the rectangle tool again. I'm going to hold the Option key on my keyboard, and I'm going to drag my existing rectangle to create a second one. Now, they're both gray. This is going to get confusing. I'm going to select the top one, and even though we haven't talked about color fills yet, I'm going to visit the inspector, I'm going to click on my color fill, and I'm going to darken that up a bit. I'm going to go all the way down to black. For the second bar here, I'm going to leave it at gray, but we're going to want to use different shades of gray, so that way different parts of the interface stand out from one another. Now, this second bar in the interface is 750 by 100, so I'm going to drag down to scale this up. I could eyeball it, I could be dragging and dropping. You'll notice that as I drag, it's very difficult to be precise. Now I could zoom in, or I could just go over here and I could type 100 for my height. That's a lot easier considering I know exactly what pixel dimensions I need in this case. I'm going to Option drag this rectangle to give me a third one. And this one is 750 by 822. This is a big one, so I'm going to type in for my height here, 822. I'll hit Return, and it leaps to the right size, and I can now go and change my color fill, just so to separate it from the previous bar. And now I need this skinny little bar, this 750 by 12, so I'm going to select my thinner bar at the top here, hold Option, and drag it down, gets all the way down to the bottom, and now I'm going to replace the height with a 12. And for those of you who already see where this is going, feel free to jump ahead. I don't want to slow anyone down. There might be some cool tricks in here, though, for those of you who are not completely confident that you have all the keyboard shortcuts and things down. So now that I've got this little bar created, I'm going to create my last little element, which is going to be the control area at the bottom. I'm going to drag that down to the bottom so it snaps into place. And this is one of those situations where it looks like the snapping is making a mistake. I'm not sure if it's an issue with my screen or if it's an issue with the actual alignment at the bottom edge here. You can see that it looks like it's going past the bottom of our artboard. So I'm going to press Command-2 right now to zoom into that shape, and then I'm going to drag it up, and there we go. Now we have a proper snap. So I'll once again press Command-1 to zoom back out, and now we're back to looking at the whole interface. And I'll change the color of this box down here just to differentiate it a bit. I'm actually going to make it lighter. Now we're ready for our circles, and we got a couple of circles going on here. So I'm going to press O to switch to the oval tool, and now when I move my cursor in the center of the artboard, it automatically gives me this red alignment guide. Now to create a circle outward from the center, some of you may remember this from the earlier lesson, but if we hold the Option key on our keyboard and we drag out, it creates our ellipse from the center outward. Now, it's creating a random ellipse that's not constrained, so don't forget about the Shift key to constrain that ellipse. Now as I drag out, it does need to be 680 by 680, so we'll want to stop right about right there. There we go. I'll drop it. It created it in that same shade of gray, or did it? What actually happened is I had a layer selected down here that was behind this layer. Now when I created my oval, it put it on top of this layer down here, but it turns out that's actually behind this gray box up here. So let's talk about arrangement for a moment. Now with arrangement, you can see on the layers list that I have rectangle 1, oval, and then rectangle 1 over and over again. So I've got a few rectangles here with an oval sandwiched in the middle. Now the way this works, if you move your cursor on top of a layer, you can actually see a blue outline around it on the actual canvas or on the artboard. And with that, I can tell that this big rectangle in the middle is the topmost layer. Now I could drag this down on the layers list to reposition it. I could drag this oval up, same effect. I just want to make sure things are in an order that makes sense. And as I add more and more objects, I'm going to need to be more and more aware of what is on top of what. Most of these don't overlap with one another, so for the most part, I don't have a problem. I don't have much to think about. But when they do overlap, like this circle and this big box, I do need to be aware of the order of my layers. And another keyboard shortcut to keep in mind is you can send something to the very top by holding Control, Option, and Command. They're all right three next to each other, and pressing the up arrow to jump it to the top. You can press the down arrow to jump it to the bottom, or the up arrow to jump it to the top. So that's a keyboard shortcut that I use a whole heck of a lot, because then I don't need to consult the layers list every time I know that I need to bring something to the top. The last thing we need to do is make sure that the circle is spaced properly. Currently, I don't have a 47 pixel gap between the box above and the circle. So how do I know that? Well, I can kind of tell by looking at it that it's not quite 47 pixels. But how do we know for sure? If we hold the Option key on our keyboard with the circle selected and move our cursor on top of the box above, it shows that it is 19 pixels. And I can now use my nudging with the arrow keys to nudge it down so I have my perfect 47 pixel gap. Because nothing on the inspector tells me that it's 47 pixels away from the box above, because everything has its own positioning relative to something else, but the inspector shows the position in a more absolute way, which is how the position relates to the artboard, not how the position relates to the position of something else. Because Sketch doesn't know what you're trying to compare the circle to until you hold Option and move your cursor over that exact thing that you're trying to compare it to. So we've got our 47 pixel gap established, and we can go and create our circles down here. So I'm going to do this the lazy way. I'm going to hold the Option key and duplicate this circle by dragging, and then I'm going to scale it down by grabbing the corner. And the middle circle is going to be 240 by 240. So I got kind of close there, but I do want to make sure that I scale it to exactly 240 by 240. I'm going to do this on the inspector itself. And you'll notice because the lock in between the width and the height is locked, when I hit return, they automatically constrain together. It's going to constrain the proportions when that lock is closed, whether the numbers match or not. It's going to constrain the existing proportions. For example, if it were 30 by 20 and I scaled it up to double the width, it would automatically also double the height. It would become 60 by 40. So now that I've got my 240 by 240 circle created, I'm going to hold Option and drag it to the right and create our smaller circle, which is going to be 120 by 120. You can start with the one on either side. It doesn't matter. They are the same size. So I'm going to scale that down. And again, I'm not going to waste my time trying to get it perfect with my cursor, because I'm just not that good with the mouse. I don't know if anyone is. I would think in any case it's quicker to do it the inspector way. So I'm going to line this up so it's centered with this guy here. I got my alignment guide there. Sometimes you don't get the alignment guides as you'd expect. Sometimes you do it in two steps. If I move it against this guy, I get my alignment guides, and then as I drag it away, I get to keep my alignment guides. And this needs to be 90 pixels from the edge. So again, with this circle highlighted, I'm going to hold Option, I'm going to measure it out, and I'm going to nudge it to the right so it's in the right spot. Then I'm going to hold Option and drag this across so I get two of them. It automatically keeps me aligned, but it's not automatically helping me with the spacing. So I'm going to hold Option, and I'm going to make sure that that's also spaced out 90 pixels from the edge. All right, so now we've got a pretty good outline hammered out. Looks like all of our shapes are the right size. Looks like everything really snapped together nicely. The only thing we didn't do, actually, is measure this from the top. It should be 55 pixels. Looks like I'm at 60. Now, these still need to be centered up with one another, so I'm going to hold the Shift key, and I'm going to make sure I have all three selected. And they get a bounding box around all three, and because the middle circle is the biggest, the top of the bounding box is the top of the middle circle. So I'll hold Option, I'll measure out my gap here, and I'll go up a few pixels. 55, that's what we want. So now we've got a perfect match between our outline in Sketch and our nasty little hand-drawn JPEG here.